What's up, guys? Welcome back. Before we get into today's video, there's 1 week left on the 1964 Volkswagen Beetle giveaway. So head to ludwicksgarage.com right now to get entered, read all the official rules, pick up one of the in-house made keyrings that we're doing for the giveaway, and get entered. We've got 1 week left. It ends next Thursday on April 4th. All right, so sorry about no Sunday upload, guys. I think that's the first Sunday in a long time. I have not had an episode up. Sunday's usually the day I try to hit, but it has been unreal busy. I've been trying to balance and juggle so many things, and I just couldn't edit in a hotel room anymore. We just got back from Import Alliance Atlanta. We were down there last Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's why I barely have a voice. We've been yelling and screaming and talking to friends all weekend long. We just pulled in about an hour ago. We hit the road from South Atlanta at like 4:30 in the morning to try to get through Atlanta, commute traffic because today's Monday. So I'm in the process of getting unloaded and getting everything put back in the shop. If you guys missed the last episode, or 2 episodes ago, we're able to fit the 700 and the Beetle in the trailer together, which is a really good achievement unlocked, since most of the cars I have here are small, and the trailer is only a single car trailer. But being a 24-foot V-nose, we were able to get both cars in there. We're getting stuff packed up, put away, all sorted out. I want to thank all of you guys who came by the Ludwick's Garage booth to hang out with us, to say hi, to check out the cars, to pick up some t-shirts. Really appreciate all of you guys' support. So as I get done putting all this stuff away, rolling straps up, getting everything organized and put back away, in today's episode, we're going to be unboxing a lot of new parts for the Auto Union project for the 1000 SP. Now, while I was gone, we got some packages from CIP1. And in these boxes, as we'll obviously unbox here pretty soon, are all of the new PCD front end disc brake conversion brake stuff. So we're going from the wide 5 old drums, which is this wild setup from the early air-cooled Volkswagens. We're going from the wide 5 setup, and we're going down to a 5x120, which is actually what the Corvair is. That's a 5x4 3/4 inch, which turns out to like a 5x120.65 or 120.7 millimeter or something like that. That will give us far more wheel options for this car, which is what I really want. There's a few wheels I have in mind for this car, but in today's episode, we're gonna unbox all that stuff and hopefully get a lot of it mocked up, because as we've left this car, we have no front end in yet. We have the EvaResto air beam and the air shocks kind of just in place to figure out what our predicament with the overhead space was gonna be. All right, guys, well, I got stuff moved around in the shop. We've got the Auto Union 1000 SP body and the pan that is not yet fixed to it back in the lift bay. I've got all the parts laid out that I'm hoping to get mounted up to the pan in this episode. This is the most recent haul from CIP1 in no particular order. These are the rear backing plates that will take wheel cylinder, adjuster, shoes, all that. So these will mount to our axle stubs. We've got all the rear hardware, springs, clips, retainers, all of that. We have adjuster hardware. We have the adjuster arms, I guess, like the threaded shanks that actually push the bottom of the shoes. We have the adjusters themselves, which actually go over these. We've got brake hoses, all 4 corners. We've got the rear and the front. So again, not in order. We've got new wheel cylinders for the rear, which will mount to the backing plates here. Didn't even want to mess with the rear ones yet. I don't know what kind of condition they're in. Here in the middle, we've got our wheel bearings. We've got some brake clips for the brake hoses, and we have some wheel seals. So I wanted to make sure I got 2 new wheel seals. Since we're going the disc brakes up front, we've got our calipers loaded here. These are not a special caliper at all. These are just getting us going. This isn't going to be a high horsepower car, so I didn't need Brembos or Willwoods or anything crazy like that. We're just getting the thing rolling, first and foremost. But also, most importantly, really most importantly, our drop spindles and kingpins have been rebuilt by my friend Mike Unlin down in Florida, and we've just gotten those back. All right, well, the sun finally came out. I put the control arms in the parts washer. Inside the control arms are still quite greasy. I didn't thoroughly go through them, but I tried not to submerge that part. These things were so caked and so disgusting. So now that we've got these all cleaned up and able to handle them without getting grease absolutely everywhere, let's get them mounted onto the new EvaResto bagged beam, and we'll start mocking some stuff up so we can start mounting some of these brand new parts. Put new bushings in, which were supplied with the EvaResto kit. Spent quite a bit of time getting these lined up onto the grooves on the roller balls. Now, just like your leaf stack that has a port drilled into it, that the grub screw locks into to basically keep the control arm from coming off. Because essentially all the way out here is your wheel. At the end of the whole run is your wheel. But on the roller bars, there's a groove that goes all the way around that the grub screw lines up to, which does the same thing. Basically, the grub screw goes in and falls into that groove and keeps the control arm from sliding off the roller bar. Now, with the new bushings, it's really difficult to get the control arm to stay on as far as it needs to get the grub screw lined up. So what I did here, this is a really good piece of advice from Max at EvaResto. Mallet them on as far as they'll go, but then they get to a point where they just kind of bounce back from the bushing being pretty thick. And I should say, first and foremost, I filed out the square port hole on the end of the control arm so it doesn't grab the roller bar. I just cleaned up the upper control arm on this side, so I'm hammering this on now. And as you can see, I'm not in far enough yet. So what I'm doing is I'm tapping it in, snugging the grub screw just a little bit to hold it essentially. Tap it some more, snug it down, tap it some more, snug it down, and we'll feel when it drops into the groove on that roller bar, and then that's when we can snug it all the way down. Okay, so I'm in the process of mounting the EvaResto lower shock relocator. This is obviously going to be for the custom airbag setup in the front. Knew that sooner than later I was going to have to address the factory lower shock bushing spacer that is seized and ultimately welded onto these lower studs. But I took a flap wheel and basically ground down the first layer and got it broken up. So I've got some pliers on it now and have it broken free. And we will twist this thing off. It's hard to do while holding a camera. Here we go. So here's one. Okay, so this is part of the genius of this design. Normally the shock mounts on the inside of the lower control arm. Well, if you see where these shock towers are, the bag mounts mount on the outside of the shock tower. And down here, that offsets quite a bit. So what Max has done is he's designed these CNC pieces bent and cut in a certain way, obviously with a relief cut here for the control arm. This first piece utilizes the grub screw itself as a stud that the jam nut actually locks it into place with. And at the same time, locks your grub screw into place as well. So this is the first piece of this lower bracket. All right, so first we're gonna take 3 of the supplied M12 washers, slide it over the lower shock stud that's on our lower control arm here. These will act as a little bit of spacing. And now the inner plate will slide over it with some supplied spacers here, like so. The studs will go through the plate we've already installed, and there's a hole on the inside right here that the factory lower shock stud will pass through. Get that lined up. So this is how the EvaResto lower rear air shock mount assembles to the lower control arm. It's pretty incredible how it's a self-contained design using 3 pieces of plate and mounting from OEM points. We're using the stud for the lower shock mount off the lower control arm as one mount point and the grub screw itself for the lower control arm as the second mount point. It's kind of ingenious. So right here is where the lower eyelet of the air shock will go. And we'll have 2 spacers like this with a bolt that'll go through it and hold that tight. All right, so now that we have the front control arms and the lower relocator kit all assembled and installed, we're going back to our freshly rebuilt spindles and knuckles, kingpin, link pin, all that stuff. So this is all the made in Germany OEM rebuilt stuff. So if you know all this stuff, this is all redundant, but there are shims that need to go on the inside and outside of the link pins, and that adjusts your camber. So what comes with it is an O-ring on each link pin and a dust excluder. And there's a specific way to mount these washers on the inside and outside of your link pin, and that is by measuring the offsets of your control arms. So I've already done that, and that's basically by putting something straight edge against the bottom of the control arm and then measuring the distance from the top control arm to your straight edge. Then I went to online charts, which give you a rundown of that measurement you take to how many shims inside and outside, upper and lower. That's what I've done now with the top link pin And now I'm doing the same with the bottom link pin. I'm going through this chart, but I'm not going to film all of what's going on here. But that's overall the theory of how to reshim your link pins when you get them rebuilt to the specific control arm offsets on your Beetle pan. All right, drop spindle on the driver's side. Shims are all in their correct place. About to mount that up, but Corey's working on the rear now. And this is the mess. Actually, I didn't even get a clip of the mess. This thing hadn't been opened up in decades. Yeah. So these are the new rear backing plates. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we're going to 69 plus-ish everywhere. But what's staying 59 is the rear wheel bearings. So since this is a rear swing arm Beetle and we're keeping it rear swing arm, that unfortunately means the axle tubes still have to run diff fluid down them to service the wheel bearings so we don't smoke them all the time. Our buddy Kyle Golding seems to have a part number for a sealed bearing cartridge or cartridge bearing to put there. So we might look into that. If you guys know off the top of your head, drop that down in the comments below because that'll be vital information before I start Googling and Oogling all over the internet. Because we'd love to cartridge bearing this so we don't have to ever worry about being able to service the bearings. Because that axle will never be down here, it will always be up here since we're going to be driving it low. He's got the new backing plate on, the old cap on with what's left of the non-existent gasket and wheel seal just for these mock-up purposes. We're going to be back into this again because I haven't bought rear shoes yet and I haven't bought new rear wheel bearings yet. This is all for mock-up stuff. We need to know what we can keep and what we need to add in this body to start building the frame inside the body. That's ultimately what we're doing. Everything's going to be redone again at some point as far as just tightening stuff up, running new brake lines and all that. Basically what we need is enough thread on the outside to get the castle nut on, but also nothing binding up and hitting. Yeah, must be that nose cone. So one thing that isn't perfectly compatible when getting this custom rear drum for the 59 pan is this nose cone right here on the spline hub. Now when we've got this all pulled together on the new backing plate with the 59 bearings that are in there, this spline hub is too long. As you can see, there's not much thread sticking out now, and that castle nut doesn't have enough thread engagement to be tight. Now obviously, as we tighten that down, it'll help pull stuff together inside, but that's still not quite enough for full thread engagement. CIP1 says that if you're gonna run this on, I think a pre-66 Beetle, I could have that wrong, but if you're running it on an early Beetle nonetheless, you have to take down about 5/8 of material off this spline hub. Now there's obviously enough there, so we're not too worried about that. We're gonna leave this for now, and we'll just tighten it down with the amount of threads we have, and that way we can just keep moving to get some wheels mocked up, probably in the next episode. But for now, we're just trying to get everything bolted on so we can get wheels on this thing and we can articulate suspension, which is why we finally got all the EvaResto stuff on to figure out where wheels and tires are gonna sit when this thing's aired out so we can start building the frame. Also, Corey got the other drum off on this side. This side is hilarious. I don't know what kind of critters, insects, or prehistoric animals were living in here, but there was definitely more than one. So we'll get this one off, and we'll do the same as the other side and get the drum on, and the rear will be ready for now. All I have to order for the rear, as I mentioned before, are new shoes. We'll reuse these arms, and then new rear wheel bearings, which will come with wheel seals, or axle seals rather, and gaskets. All right, well, the rear drums are on with new backing plates. We didn't put the wheel cylinders in yet. Obviously, as we mentioned before, we have a lot more to assemble in that backing plate. Corey's working on the front rotor. I can't find my grease packer. So
I am the grease packer.
So we're doing it by hand, and I'm sure as most of you guys, it's not the first time we've packed bearings by hand. And everyone has a different method because Corey's tap, tap, taparoo method is not the way I normally do it. No? So it's funny to see, like, I love it.
Yeah.
So we're hand packing the bearings, and I'm missing a very vital part to this whole deal. Now, it's okay because we don't have to drive the car because clearly we have a little bit more work to do than check the oil and back it out of the shop. But I do not have the notched washers and nuts to go against the outer wheel bearings to hold the whole assembly onto the spindles. And the spindles that were originally on these kingpins were the double nutted original 59s. And I don't think I got those spindles back from my buddy Mike when we got all this stuff back. And I don't know if they're the same thread. They might be completely different. You guys might know off the top of your head. But for right now, we're missing them. I'm going to mount the front airbags so we can get a look at what this whole front beam and assembly looks like completely assembled. Yep. Well, we got the front end basically assembled. We're just missing the nuts, as I mentioned. Should have those tomorrow. We've got the whole EvaResto beam assembled except for the steering components. So we haven't mounted the steering box yet with the shortened track rods. But for now, we have the disc conversion on. The calipers mount in a really bizarre location, which will look so crazy. But our tie rod arm is here. Over here, we have steering motion. It's all real tight. Again, these are a 5x130 Porsche PCD and 5x120. So it'll give us options. Both front and rear have that dual PCD. It's starting to look like an assembled pan at this point. This EvaResto kit is pretty wild. This bottom bracket kit, I mean, even Max himself from EvaResto says it's his like favorite brainchild. I said, dude, it should be, because this is a really cool design that again utilizes 2 OEM mounts.
That mixed with the bolt-in rear, and the way he supported it and braced it all, it's crazy.
It's such a cool setup. Unreal. If you guys haven't seen that episode, go back and watch the rear subframe going together. The complete bolt-in rear bag kit for a Beetle or Gia. Insane quality, really good design, really good dudes as well. Fully support what they're doing. Go hit up EvaResto. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. We're not mounting wheels yet. We'll get the nuts and everything fastened up front, and then we'll set the body down. We'll probably pull the wheels off the Corvair just because I've got some 5x120 wheels right here. Big things happening. We got a lot going on with the Overcrest Rally, a lot to talk about with that project. If you guys are on the Patreon, you know what we're building out there. So that's coming up soon. I'm flying out to California in a couple of weeks to start that build. Corey and I are still full throttle on this auto union, but we're gaining ground. So I'm super stoked on this. But thank you guys so much for watching and for all of the support. We will see you in the next episode.